Hello everybody at home. My name is Tim Dobson and I, along with Lacrosse Victoria, am bringing you a tutorial on how to string a women's lacrosse stick with a mesh pocket. This is the first of 3 videos. I'm going to take you through stringing the Topstring, and the reason I am doing mesh, not a traditional women's pocket, is that it is a recently introduced part of the game. I think the benefits of a mesh pocket are manifold. And it's also that I think mesh is easier to string. It's a little bit easier to get a good quality, high performing pocket out of a mesh. And also mesh is readily available if you know any men's lacrosse players, or if you're at your club, there'll be mesh around. It's an easy one to put into a stick. So let's get started with the Topstring. And the first thing we're going to need to do is we will look at preparing our mesh. So I've got a standard 10 diamond performance mesh piece. Performance mesh, for those of you who are new to the game, is essentially it's not affected by water. So older meshes had were a nylon woven and had sort of like a polyurethane type coating. It was just like a hard, almost plasticky coating, which would break down over time. But it also meant that it would become waterlogged and the mesh would bag out and sort of change in the wet. So another big upside for going from traditional and leather to a performance mesh pocket is that the water effect is going to be far less. Even with the sort of the pre-formed manufactured pockets you can get nowadays, you can often end up with your water bagging it out and becoming illegal in your pocket. So the first thing we're going to do is just to sort of give it a little bit of a stretch. I've rolled the mesh up, so if you just start with the mesh in any way possible, just stretch it out. You can see the diamonds flare out a fair way, and performance mesh will break in very quickly. You don't need to worry much about giving it any break-in time before you string it. But just the one thing I normally do is I roll it up, and I do this with all my mesh, go from goalie mesh to sort of old hard mesh. And I essentially just sort of scrunch and twist. And the reason to do that is I find it just stretches the mesh in a number of different directions. And then when that's been done, it just sort of means that it's going to change a little less when you put it in the stick. So just twist it in either direction. So sort of just front, back, and then back to front. Give it a stretch, give it a roll, any of that. Pull some faces while you're doing it. That improves the stretching. And then in theory, once you're done, you should have a nice stretched out bit of mesh. So the next thing we're going to need to do when we're doing our top string, and top strings can be done a number of different ways. I'm going to show you the way I do mine. In the time I've been stringing, I find it's the way I get the best performance out of my top string, whether that's to do with how centered the mesh is, and then also how well I can tension it and all of that. So on your mesh, you'll see that at the top, at one end, you'll have a full diamond meeting the side. So hopefully you can see that on the video. So we've got a full diamond meeting the side. And at the other end, we have a half diamond meeting the side. So they're not quite diamonds. They're hexagons in this mesh, but you'll have a half diamond at one end and a full at the other. So this part of the mesh has 10 diamonds across the top. This part has 9 diamonds across the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the 9 diamond row and I'm going to fold it over. So from here, I'm going to end up with a little bit of a tab of mesh on either side. So hopefully you can see that on the video. If I went the other way, I'd end up with a triangle, an angle of mesh going up at the top. So I'm going to start with that. And it means that with this mesh, you've got the stripes down the middle, the strikers, so you can sort of see where it is. But I have three diamonds across the top here. And I've got an odd number of mesh diamonds across the top. And I'm going to want that for the way I do my top string. So just grab some string, and the way I'm going to start is I'm going to start in the middle of my head. I'm not going to go from one side to the other. You can if you want. I find I can get my pockets a little bit better centered this way. So I'm going to thread my string through the centered diamond and then get it equidistant on the string. So there's mesh is attached here. I've only got it through one diamond at the moment, and I'm going to put it into the stick and start tying it off. So from here, I've got my stick forward away from me, so the back of the stick is facing me, and I'm going to go through the front of the head here, and I'm going to go through the front of the head to the 2 center top string holes. So once I'm there, I'm just going to pull those up, and I've got my mesh now sort of sitting in the middle. It's not attached though, it's just hanging there. So I'm holding onto the strings at this end, and I'm about to go from there. So what I'm going to do is, with this a little bit loose, I'm now going to feed the string back through the center of that hole. So from the back coming forward, I'm going to pull it through and pull it back to my side. And then again, I'm going to go from the back coming forwards, and I'm going to pull it back through. So now the mesh is held up like that. You should be able to see, hopefully that focuses in the camera. The mesh is up like that now, and I'm going to pull that sort of a little tight now and just try and get it sat in the middle. So the mesh will move around. You don't need to worry about that at this stage. We're just going to leave that there for now. So now, from the first time I went through the front of the head back towards myself, this time I'm going to go through the back of the head forwards, and I'm going to now pull it back towards myself and tie it off on itself. So it's going to come, you'll have a little loop in the mesh, and as you in the string, and as you come through, you're going to pull it back through itself, and we're going to then lock our first knot off. So if you look at the front of the stick, the knot from the front and then the knot from the back, and I'll have close-ups of this, sort of just as static images through the video. So that's our first knot, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. So as you go through, each one of these is the same. So now I'm just going to tighten this off against itself. You should be able to use this knot to hold it firm. So I'm going to tighten it against itself, and I'm now going to thread this one from the back through the front. And then as I have it coming through the front, I'm going to have this loop at the rear, and I'm going to pull it through there. And I now have my knotted mesh tied off equally. So the mesh is still just through that one diamond at the top. And you'll see that I've just got the two knots there holding it in place. So now I'm going to come back through, and I'm going to loop through. You'll see with the mesh here, I've got it through the diamonds. Each diamond's attachment point is sort of a little strand of mesh. I'm going to go through two of those heading to my left. So down through the top of the mesh, and then back up through the sides. So if you're looking at the mesh from the top, if I just stand up and show you, you can see there's two loops, and I'm pulling the string back out here, and I'll do the same on both sides. So I've got down through the top, and then pull that down, and then back up through the sides. And I would recommend pausing this, if you're stringing along at home, pausing this and just sort of having a few practice runs, but I will show you some static images as well throughout the video, so you should have already seen some of those. So now I've got this string. It is through, the mesh is still loose on this side though, so I'm going to come back through the front of the head. I'm going to go through the top string hole. I'm going to have my loop of string here, and I'm going to pull that through and tighten it off. You can do what's called a drop top. I won't do that in this video, but if there are other stringing videos you'd like to see, make sure you comment on this video on whichever platform you're on, and then hopefully Lacrosse Victoria can keep bringing you some stringing content as we're all stuck inside for the reason that we all know. So mesh back through, the string is now with me back on the back side of the head. I'm now going to go from the back of the head forward, so through the back to the front, and I'm going to then pull the string through this loop that I've created. So I'm here and I pull it back now, and I tighten that off again, and you'll see there's a third knot, the same as the first two on that side. Now I'm going to go out the other way. So I've got the two mesh holes here. I'm through the top of those. I'm going to come from the front. I'm going to go from the front of the head back into this loop and pull tight. And it's key to get the tightness right here, because as the mesh is pulled, you'll see that the mesh wants to sit equidistant between these holes. These two loops here, so this loop at the front and this loop at the front, are being held by these knots in place. So getting the tightness is key, because it means that the knots all stay in the same place and they don't shift around, because you want the center of your mesh to line up with the center of the head. You don't want it adjusting to either side. It makes getting a pocket quite hard. So I've done my first knot here. I'm now going to go from the back of the head through to the front again, and then coming back through this loop that I've created here. I'm going to tighten that off, which means I then have my 4 knots all equidistant. Mesh is spaced but still loose at the sides. As I pull it tight, I'll end up having that mesh tighten up as it goes. So I've got two loops of mesh here. I've got one here, one here. I'm going to go down through the first top section. So if you see where I'm coming through, we have the top of the mesh here and the top of the mesh here. I'm pulling down through this section, and I'm going to pull it off to the side here. So you'll see that this loop is now being tied off by this knot, and I'll show you what we do with that in a moment. So I'll do that on both sides. So I'm coming down through the mesh, so from the top down through this top hole, pulling it out to the side. So now both strings are loose and the mesh is now held on by that. So what I'm going to do is, for this head, it's a harrow head, all the heads you'll have will be different. So what I'm going to try and do is teach you just the general theory of how to make a pocket rather than a specific pattern. So for this head, where that top hole is pulls the mesh to a pretty good spot. I'm happy with that. Sometimes you can pull it lower. Some sticks have quite a flat top, and you need to adjust accordingly. But for me, I think if I pull it tight to the sides of this, I'll end up with a top string that's about that shape, and I'm pretty happy with that. So again, these are all sort of general theories that you can apply to any head, and that makes it just a little bit easier, because if you have one that only works with specific heads, it's not as transferable. So the string is now down through the mesh. So I'm coming out the back of the mesh here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to slot it back through this top folded diamond. So here I've got this diamond that's left over at the end with a little tab of mesh at the top. I'm going to come through from the back of that to the front. So I only want it at the front section. The mesh has, it's folded over here. I want it through the front of those two folds. Hopefully my hands aren't covering too much of this as I go through. So I'm coming through the front of that, and I'm going to go through the inside of this top string hole. So there's a top string hole here. I'm going to go through from the inside of the head to the outside and pull through. I'm then going to come back through, and this time I want to get both pieces, both loops of mesh, so from the front and the back. So I'm here through the front and the back. I'm then going to push through this side hole again. So the mesh here, I've now got a loop which will be attaching that mesh. So there's a loop of string, and as I pull it tight, the mesh will get pulled tight to the sidewall. So from there, I pull nice and firm. And again, having a nice firm top string almost acts like having an extra shooting string. You only get the two in the women's game, but sometimes if you've got the mesh pulled nice and tight here, it's going to help the ball release anyway. So hopefully that's something that we're all getting. So we get it nice and tight there. If there is room, you can do a second loop around. A lot of the time I do it just because I think it looks good. And a lot of lacrosse stick stringing is just making a stick look pretty. But from there, the second loop pulls the mesh nice and tight here. And it also means that the tension point at this top corner is doubled over. So it's not one piece of string just being pulled against. It sort of gives you that double loop. It's a little bit of extra security. And it also means that your knot won't slide back through this hole, which can happen. So what we need now is I'm going to do my first sort of ending knot, the way I'm going to tie this off to the plastic and then leave this string. So what I'm going to do is, with my right hand outside, left hand inside, you can do it the other way if you're left-handed, I'm going to create one loop in the string. So I've got one loop here. So you'll see that, one loop like that. I then want to create a second loop like that. So I now have a double loop in my string, if you can see that. And then with that, I'm now going to pull through. So the string is going to come from my side back through both loops, and I'm going to pull it through as we go here. So I've now got two loops with a string passing through. I can put up a still image of this knot as well. And then I'm going to pull those loops down towards the plastic of the head, and pinching down here, I'm going to pull through so the knot sits nice and tight. So obviously what I've done there, I've got a third loop. So that's just a little bit of slack that hasn't pulled through. So sometimes you just need to do a little bit of wriggling and adjusting, but I'll leave that in the video because it does happen. And sometimes all that needs is you just need to pull the loop that's loose. You just need to pull that through, and then you can pull it down nice and tight. So now I've got, if you just see there, I've got the little knot attached to the sidewall. My mesh is nice and tight across the top. I'm going to do the same on the other side now. So back through from the back of the head to the front, just in that front loop of mesh from here, inside of the head, top string coming out, pull nice and tight. I'm going to come back through. I want both loops this time. So I'm coming back through here. I'm going to then go from the inside again, back through with our double loop, and I'm going to pull that tight. So again, pull it nice and tight. So I've got a nice taut top string up there. I'm then going to do the same knot on this side. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to do one loop. I'm I'm going to do a second loop, twist that round. So I've got both loops here, and I'm then going to come from the front of the mesh away from me through to the back. And I'm then going to cinch that knot down so it sits nice and tight. So I got it first time, didn't have to redo any of the knots, but we're there. So we've got one loop on that side and one knot on that side and one knot on that side, okay? So that's going to bring us to the end of our first video. We're just doing the top string. If you're stringing along at home, go back, pause it wherever you need to. I will have those, I'll have those static images up, but you can see from here, we've got the top string now attached. It's nice and even, symmetrical. You can see that center diamond lines up with the center of the head, and that's really what we want here. We want to make sure it's nice and symmetrical so that when we do our sidewalls down the sides of the stick, the channel in the center of our pocket is right in the middle. So tune in next time. We'll be doing our sidewalls, and then in the third part of the video, we'll be doing the shooters and the bottom string. And we'll go from there. So if you've got any questions or if there are any types of pockets you'd like to see, make sure you comment below and make sure you stay checking out the Lacrosse Victoria socials while we're all in isolation and lockdown. All right, and then until next time, I'll see you around.